This is the public record, what Parliament says and what the numbers actually show. In December 2024, Keir Starmer appointed Peter Mandelson as Britain's ambassador to Washington, the most senior diplomatic posting in the country. Before any senior public appointment, the government conducts a vetting process, security checks, background assessments, a full review of whether the person is suitable for the role. Parliament voted on the 4th of February to see those documents. Today, the government laid its second tranche of Mandelson Files before the House, and in the process of explaining what it had published, it also confirmed what it had not. Here is what Parliament was told today.
Tomorrow, Tuesday the 2nd of June, will be Committee of the Whole House of the Armed Forces Bill. The business for Wednesday the 3rd of June will be a general debate on the Government's response to the humble address on the appointment of Lord Mandelson. The business for Thursday the 4th of June will be a general debate on Pride Month, and I will announce further business in the usual way on Thursday.
Shadow Leader of the House, Jessie Norman.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Leader very much for that business update and also for the news of the debate on Wednesday. That will be an opportunity for backbench members to put debates and matters into the record. But for scrutiny of the government, actually, by far the best way is to have the questions that were about to follow this discussion. And I'm afraid, Mr. Speaker, that the Mandelson files were released publicly only at 2 p.m. and 1,500 pages. No backbench member can be expected to have mastered this. Since those files could have been put in the public domain at 9:30 this morning, Mr. Speaker, could I just register with the Leader that I think, as he recognises the importance of parliamentary scrutiny, we're all owed a slightly higher quality of scrutiny than this has received.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do acknowledge what the Right Honourable Gentleman is saying, but that's precisely why I just announced that we're having Wednesday's debate, that it will be a general debate, and I'm sure my Right Honourable friend, the Chief Secretary, the Prime Minister, will respond to some of those points shortly.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise only really to pass on the frustrations from these benches and from my residents that the important legislation planned for Wednesday will now be delayed, and that the incredibly important improvements to rail services that our residents are calling out for will be further delayed again. Parkinson's law suggested that work expands to fill the space available for its completion. Can I suggest Mandelson's law, which is when you appoint him to your government, his scandals will expand to fill the time available for their discussion. Can I ask the Minister whether he agrees that this scandal will be the defining legacy of the Starmer Premiership and shows clearly how the change and service agenda promised after the scandal and sleaze of the last Tory government were as empty words as suggesting that proper process was followed in his appointment?
The Minister just spent 4 minutes explaining the redaction process. Let me put that in plain terms. Over 300 individual documents were referred to the Intelligence and Security Committee for review. The ISC agreed which sections could be withheld on national security grounds. Those redactions are labelled with 3 asterisks in the published bundles. Additionally, junior officials' names, contact details, personal data of third parties and commercially sensitive information have been removed. And on top of all of that, the Metropolitan Police has asked the government to withhold a further set of documents because of an active criminal investigation. That is not a parliamentary procedural matter. That is a police investigation into documents related to the appointment of Britain's most senior diplomat.
I would like to update the House on the government's response to the humble address of the 4th of February. Before I do, I think it's important for all of us to reflect again on the impact that this debate will have on the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. Members across the House will be aware of the truly horrific crimes he committed against countless women and girls, and we hold them in our thoughts when discussing these issues again today. Mr. Speaker, the government has today laid the second tranche of documents. These were laid before the House in advance of this statement and are now on gov.uk for the public to see. The documents we are publishing today are one of the largest government publications ever laid before this House. This disclosure process has been wide-ranging, costing the Cabinet Office alone over £1 million. As the House knows, this was an official-led process, with judgments made by senior officials, and I am grateful for the careful work they have undertaken right up until today's publication. Whilst the first tranche dealt with Peter Mandelson's appointment, withdrawal and severance, This second tranche responds to the parts of the motion which requested communications and documents concerning his appointment and vetting, as well as messages between Peter Mandelson and ministers, special advisers and civil servants in the months prior to and throughout the duration of his appointment. Mr. Speaker, I recognise that the House will need sufficient time to review today's tranche in full, given the size of the publication. As we have just heard from the Leader of the House, that is why I have secured government time on Wednesday for a subsequent general debate, so that there is an opportunity for members to ask further questions after today's statement. To inform that debate and for clarity and accountability, I draw the House's attention to the methodology set out in the publication today. This explains in detail how the government undertook the disclosure process. I will not repeat that in full here today, Mr. Speaker, but I will make reference to a number of areas that I know the House has expressed an interest in previously. First, on redactions. In line with the motion, over 300 individual documents were referred under a process agreed between the Government and the Intelligence and Security Committee. I can confirm that no material has been redacted on the grounds of prejudice to national security or international relations without the committee's approval. For clarity, all redacted material agreed with the ISC is labelled in the bundles today with 3 asterisks. Outside of this arrangement, this process does not change the important and well-established constitutional principle that national security and international relations judgments are ultimately for the government. I once again express my thanks to the Intelligence and Security Committee for their engagement in this process. Further limited redactions have been made outside of the ISC process in respect of information that relates to junior officials' names, contact details like telephone numbers and email addresses, the personal or commercially sensitive data of third parties not relevant to the motion, and where relevant, legal professional privilege. I would also like to confirm that no reductions have been made to references to Global Council, other than to protect the identity of individuals who worked there and are not themselves public figures. Officials have sought to be transparent in the material where the individual is a Global Council employee. No redactions have been made to references to Palantir and Anduril outside of the scope of the existing ISC redactions process, and no clear references to current or former UK politicians have been redacted on the basis of their being third parties. I can also confirm to the House that no government minister or special advisor has determined any of the redactions themselves. The redaction process has been overseen by Cabinet Office officials and, where relevant, in agreement with the ISC. The Cabinet Office Humble Address team has taken advice, in addition to this, from an independent King's Counsel.
The Minister just confirmed that some messages cannot be recovered. The reason: devices were changed or disappearing messages were turned on. She added, and this is a direct quote from today's statement, "myself included." A Cabinet Minister has just told Parliament that she personally had disappearing messages turned on during communications with Peter Mandelson. The government's own statement acknowledges this. The government's own statement says the messages were turned on for, quote, reasonable and permitted reasons. Parliament voted on the 4th of February to see all communications relating to Mandelson's appointment. Some of those communications no longer exist. Parliament cannot scrutinise what has been deleted.
The context of the established rules and precedents that relate to humble addresses. If these rules were not relevant, then the humble address would have required extensive additional detail on the face of the motion dealing with these procedural issues. However, I do recognise the level of interest in the House in respect of these non-national security and international relations related redactions. And so, on the recommendation of the Intelligence and Security Committee, I can confirm that the Honourable Member for North Dorset, the Chair of the Public Administration and Constitutional Affairs Committee, has reviewed our approach to third-party redactions this morning. He has confirmed that we have applied the methodology set out in the document and that, in his view, the redactions are sensible, reasonable and proportionate. I thank the Intelligence and Security Committee for this recommendation and the Honourable Member for the additional reassurance he has provided on this point. Mr. Speaker, as the House is aware, the Metropolitan Police has also asked the Government to withhold some material in scope of the motion, which they considered could be prejudicial to their ongoing criminal investigation or any subsequent prosecution. This request remains in place, and I'm very grateful again to the Chair of the Public Administration and Constitutional Affairs Committee, with whom we have also shared this information in order to provide additional accountability of the government's actions. I hope that members appreciate the need not to prejudice the investigation and understand that I will not be able to answer questions about certain documents which have been withheld. No responsible government would wish to undermine a criminal investigation and put at risk the justice that it seeks, and I'm sure the House will share this position. I can, however, Mr. Speaker, confirm that this material does include questions put to Peter Mandelson by the Prime Minister's then Chief of Staff and Peter Mandelson's responses. In addition, a small number of documents have been withheld at the request of the police, which fall broadly into the following categories. Firstly, national security vetting information. Secondly, conflict of interest process material. And thirdly, relevant internal correspondence with Peter Mandelson. Such information will, of course, be published at the conclusion of the investigation or at the point at which it would no longer be prejudicial to the police investigation to do so.
What is the Metropolitan Police investigating? The government has not said. It cannot say because commenting could prejudice the investigation and any subsequent prosecution. What it has confirmed is that the withheld material falls into 3 specific categories. First, national security vetting information. Second, conflict of interest process material. Third, relevant internal correspondence with Peter Mandelson. Those 3 categories together describe the core of what Parliament voted to see: the vetting process, the conflict of interest assessment, the communications between Mandelson and government. All 3 are now in the hands of the Metropolitan Police. The government says this material will be published, quote, at the conclusion of the investigation or at the point at which it would no longer be prejudicial to do so. Parliament does not know when that will be.
This has involved requesting searches of email, messaging platforms such as WhatsApp, and other related communication services on both work and personal devices. However, the House should note that some messages may not have been backed up where devices may have been changed, or disappearing messages were turned on for reasonable and permitted reasons, including before the dismissal of Peter Mandelson or the passing of the humble address, myself included. I do recall, Mr. Speaker, having some limited exchanges with Peter Mandelson over WhatsApp, including those I have already discussed in the media. But these conversations did not involve transacting government business and were in line with official guidance on the use of non-corporate communications channels at the time. Mr. Speaker, I also share the view put by the Intelligence and Security Committee to the House that there are lessons for the civil service to learn in respect of better note-keeping, archiving, and the use of appropriate levels of secure IT systems in the future.
So here is where the Mandelson Files stand today. The vetting process summary, shared with the Intelligence and Security Committee but not yet published. Internal correspondence with Mandelson, withheld at the request of the Metropolitan Police. Conflict of interest material, withheld at the request of the Metropolitan Police. Some messages, gone. Disappearing messages were turned on. The Minister confirmed this herself. Parliament voted 4 months ago to see all of this. Today it was told it cannot. A general debate has been scheduled for Wednesday. Members will have questions. This is the public record. New analysis every week. What Parliament says and what the numbers actually show. Subscribe if you want the full picture.